This is Street Politics Report, where we break down what's really happening behind the headlines. The kind of stories that come with paperwork, not punchlines. Federal charges, street codes, and courtroom tension, all part of the same timeline. And tonight, we're tapping in with one of the biggest hip-hop legal cases in modern American history, the YSL indictment out of Atlanta. This wasn't just a local sweep or a random rap beef caught in the crossfire. This was an 88-page RICO case tying one of the South's biggest rap icons to a street organization the state calls violent, organized, and deeply rooted in bloodshed. Headlines said it fast: Young Thug, Gunna, and dozens of others charged in a sweeping indictment, with music lyrics used as evidence. But to really understand what went down, you gotta look past the headlines and into the documents. Who was watching? What were they recording? And how did a rap label turn into what the state claims was a full-blown criminal enterprise? This case pulled back the curtain on Atlanta's music scene, revealing how deep the ties go between studios, street corners, and state prosecutors. The question ain't just whether Young Thug is guilty or not. It's how close the music industry sits to the streets that raised it, and what happens when that line blurs. We're gonna walk you through the background. How YSL started, who's involved, what the charges say, and why this case could change how lyrics get used in courtrooms forever. And we're doing it without hype or clickbait, just real facts, street context, and what it all means for a generation raised on rap. Because when the feds come, they don't just want a conviction, they want a narrative. This is the breakdown, before the breakdown. Welcome to Street Politics Report. Let's get into it. Everything in this report is based on public indictments, official statements, and verified media sources. All individuals mentioned are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This documentary is for educational purposes only, not to glorify crime, sensationalize pain, or promote negativity. The goal here is to make sense of how a legal system built on surveillance and strategy intersects with a culture built on storytelling and survival. We're not here to paint heroes or villains, just to show what happens when lyrics, lives, and law enforcement collide. Federal prosecutors have their narrative, the defense teams have theirs. And somewhere in between sits a city trying to understand how one of its biggest rap stars became the face of a RICO indictment. This is not about taking sides, it's about showing the full picture so you can draw your own conclusions. Because in a case this deep, with this much history and this many lives affected, surface-level talk just won't cut it. Let's keep it real, respectful, and rooted in facts. Atlanta ain't just a city. It's a whole ecosystem. Music, money, and movement. And if you really want to understand how YSL came to be what it is, you gotta start on the south side. Zone 3, Cleveland Avenue. Cleveland Ave ain't polished. It ain't on no tourist brochure. But it's one of them blocks where you see the entire spectrum of the hustle, from the bottom to the charts. People know each other by nickname, and every corner got history. Here, rap isn't just entertainment, it's the soundtrack of survival. Zone 3 birthed a lot. Legends, losses, and lessons. That South Side drawl in the music? That comes from real stories, real scars. When Young Thug rapped about snakes and slime, it wasn't metaphorical to the streets, it was cultural code. And Cleveland Ave? That was the soil it grew in. Economically, it's like many other hoods across the country. Limited opportunity, heavy police presence, and a strong code of loyalty. But what makes ATL different is how the rap game gave some of these young guys a platform. Labels started seeing the city as the new capital. Suddenly, artists from the trenches were getting million-dollar deals. But not everybody around them left the street life behind. In this part of Atlanta, there's no clean break between the block and the booth. The same people holding you down in the studio might have held you down in a shootout. The respect comes from what you did before the fame, and that pressure to keep it real, that's what makes things complicated. By the late 2010s, Cleveland Ave had become known not just for its artists, but also for the affiliations behind them. Gangs weren't just in the background, they were part of the identity. And in that mix, YSL rose up, not just as a crew or a clique, but something bigger. The city had seen indictments before, but this one? With rap royalty at the center? It sent a message, and it made one thing clear. In Atlanta, the line between music and the streets was paper thin. To understand YSL, you gotta go back before the platinum plaques and viral records, back to when it was just a small crew repping a tight corner of the South Side. YSL stands for Young Slime Life, and depending on who you ask, it's either a music label that changed the game or a violent criminal street gang tied to years of bloodshed. That split narrative sits at the heart of this whole indictment. According to Fulton County prosecutors, YSL began in or around 2012. They say it wasn't born in a boardroom. It came out the mud. Cleveland Ave, Zone 3. A tight circle of young dudes trying to carve their name into the city. Some were rapping, some were riding, all were trying to make it. And when young Thug started gaining momentum with his unique style and delivery, that crew started to glow with him. Thug didn't just rap. He moved like a boss. Fashion wild, lyrics coded, persona untouchable. And behind him, YSL grew. The slime lifestyle became a brand. What started as a street-level movement evolved into a cultural identity. Other artists came up under that umbrella. Gunna, Yak Gotti, Lil Duke, and more. And by the late 2010s, YSL wasn't just a crew. It was a label, a lifestyle, and for the state, a target. The DA's office paints a different picture. In their eyes, YSL never stopped being what it was at the start. A gang with ties to the national blood set, particularly the sex money murder subset. They claim the music was just a mask, that while Thug was on stage, others in the crew were putting in real work in the streets, murders, assaults, drug trafficking. And the lines between artist and enforcer blurred. But ask people close to the movement, and they'll tell you YSL was about loyalty, brotherhood, getting out the hood together. The fact that some members had criminal pasts wasn't news, that's life in the trenches. But they say the crew evolved, the music changed lives, and the state just couldn't see past the tattoos and the slang. Still, the foundation matters. When you come from a place where survival is the main goal, the transition to legitimacy ain't clean. Some folks stay in the game. Others try to rise above it. And some, like Thug, get caught in the middle trying to juggle fame, loyalty, and the weight of the past. By the time YSL made it to the charts, the seeds were already planted. And when the feds came knocking, they weren't just looking at who had a verse. They were tracking who had a role. At the center of it all stands Jeffrey Lamar Williams, better known to the world as Young Thug. To the rap game, he's a pioneer, one of the most unique voices to ever come out of the South. To prosecutors, he's something else entirely. The alleged kingpin of a criminal enterprise that used music as a cover for murder, extortion, and gang activity. Thug came up different. His sound was unpredictable. His fashion broke all molds. He wasn't trying to fit in with anyone. He created his own lane, and that made him magnetic. To fans, he was fearless. To the industry, he was a risk that paid off. But in the indictment, he's painted as the leader of YSL, someone who called shots not just in the studio but in the streets. Then there's Sergio Kitchens, a.k.a. Gunna, seen as the more polished, radio-friendly side of the crew. His melodies took over the charts, but his name landed in the same indictment. The feds said he was a documented YSL member, tied in by association and street reputation. Even though his charges were less serious, the implication was clear. Success doesn't shield you from surveillance. Yak Gotti and Lil Duke, names that don't hit Billboard but ring out heavy in the streets, were listed as foot soldiers, allegedly involved in violent acts, retaliations, and holding down the turf. According to the documents, they weren't just background players. They were central to the activity that turned YSL into a pattern of racketeering conduct. And then there's Fani Willis, Fulton County District Attorney. Her name carries weight now, but before the headlines, she was already making noise with aggressive RICO tactics. She had just taken down crews like YFN, and she made it clear that Atlanta wouldn't be a safe haven for gang violence hiding behind music. When she stood at the podium and laid out the YSL charges, it was a warning. Rap ain't above the law. Behind the scenes, the case also has its alleged informants. Jail calls, texts, proffered testimony. The state claims it's got insiders, some flipping, some still active. And while the streets debate who's real and who's not, the paperwork tells its own story. Each name in this case carries weight, whether it's music clout, street reputation, or legal pressure. But none of them exist in isolation. In this kind of enterprise, everyone plays a part. And when the feds start drawing lines, even silence can become evidence. Every case has a spark, a moment that changes how law enforcement watches, how prosecutors strategize, and how the public tunes in. For YSL, that moment was years in the making. But according to the paperwork, one shooting flipped the switch. It was 2015. A man named Donovan Thomas, known as Big Nut, was gunned down outside a barber shop in Atlanta. It wasn't just any hit. It was surgical, strategic, multiple shooters, broad daylight. According to the DA, this wasn't random. This was retaliation. And to the state, it marked the start of a long trail of violence tied to YSL. Big Nut had connections. Word in the streets said his killing escalated tensions between YSL and another crew. YFN, linked to another Atlanta rapper, YFN Lucci. What followed was a tit-for-tat war. Shootings, stabbings, threats. And while the streets felt the pressure, the feds were watching something else. The music. Lyrics started popping up that seemed a little too specific. Lines about choppers, bodies, and the same names that were on police files. It wasn't just rap talk. Some of it, prosecutors claimed, lined up with real events. One bar would drop, and weeks later a shooting would happen. The state began treating lyrics like confessions. One of the most discussed pieces of evidence was a lyric from Thug himself. "I never killed anybody, but I got something to do with that body." To fans, that was metaphor. To the DA, that was motive. Suddenly, studio sessions became exhibits. What was once art was now ammo in a courtroom. But that wasn't all. In 2021, YFN Lucci was reportedly stabbed in jail, and prosecutors claimed that Thug authorized a hit on Lucci while behind bars. More fuel for the RICO case. They say the attempt linked back to YSL affiliates and showed the ongoing nature of the organization's violence. These were no longer isolated events. The state saw them as a pattern. And while the streets debated whether these lyrics were real or just rap, the feds built a case that blurred the line between storytelling and self-incrimination. What made it worse for the defense? Social media, jail calls, text messages. Moments where members allegedly referenced crimes directly, not in verses, but in casual conversation. Screenshots became statements. Likes became leads. A simple post could be used to build intent. By the time the indictment dropped in 2022, the state had built a narrative that tied multiple shootings, a years-long feud, and dozens of coded lyrics back to YSL. And it all started with one murder that never got forgotten. The death of Big Nut. From that moment on, everything changed. The lyrics weren't just rhymes anymore, they were roadmaps. And the streets of Atlanta were no longer just listening. They were being recorded. The streets move fast, but the feds move quiet. From the moment Big Nut got hit in 2015, the escalation didn't play out overnight. It built slow, layered, and deadly. And while folks on Cleveland Ave might have seen it as neighborhood drama, the authorities were stacking it piece by piece like a puzzle only they could see. First came the retaliations. Gunshots in broad daylight, drive-bys, silent cars pulling up, letting off, and disappearing before the neighbors could react. Cops would show up, collect shell casings, take notes. But they weren't moving yet. Not publicly. By 2017, the streets were talking. YSL and YFN allegedly locked in a bloody Cold War. One incident would lead to another. You might hear about a shooting at a gas station. Then a week later, somebody's car torched on the other side of town. No arrests, just whispers. The police reports started to connect names, vehicles, and times. The kind of things that only matter when you're trying to build a timeline. But the real shift came when the feds started cross-referencing everything with social media. This wasn't just old-school surveillance. This was 21st century tracking. They were watching IG lives, reading captions, decoding emojis, checking timestamps. If someone posted a clip in designer holding stacks the same night a rival got shot, that wasn't flex. That was intel. Then came the jail calls. Members locked up still talking reckless, allegedly plotting moves, giving orders, bragging on the phone like it wasn't recorded. Some of those calls later ended up in the indictment, word for word. The state didn't need a camera on every corner. They had people recording themselves. Between 2018 and 2020, several homicides, armed robberies, and assaults were linked by the DA's office to individuals with ties to YSL. Some were direct, others were circumstantial. But all of them painted a picture. This wasn't random violence. It was organized, coordinated, structured. The same names kept popping up. Young Thug wasn't arrested. Not yet. He was still doing shows, dropping hits, signing artists. But in the background, the feds were laying bricks. They were tracking who was riding in which car, what phones pinged near crime scenes, who posted what after a body dropped. Even subtle things, like a lyric changing from I might to I did, started raising eyebrows in courtrooms. Meanwhile, the streets started feeling the tension. Police presence got heavier. Raids started hitting certain spots more often. And every time something happened, folks would ask, was it connected to YSL? The name started carrying weight, even in silence. Then 2021 hit. YFN Lucci got locked, then allegedly stabbed behind bars. Prosecutors said it was a hit attempt, tied back to Thug's crew. That move gave the DA what they needed, proof, in their eyes, that this wasn't just history. It was active. Now they had motive, they had history, and they had momentum. All they needed next was a case. The streets may have been loud, but the federal investigation was silent. Surgical. While the city was distracted by beats and beefs, the DA's office, the Atlanta Police Department, and GBI were collecting years' worth of receipts. And by the time it dropped, the YSL RICO case wasn't just a takedown, it was a message. Let's start with the playbook. RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It was originally built to dismantle the mob, but prosecutors like Fulton County's Fani Willis, she applied it to the streets. Under RICO, you don't have to pull the trigger. If you're part of an enterprise that benefits from or orders crime, you can be charged like you did it yourself. One conspiracy connects it all. The indictment laid out the case in 88 pages, 56 counts, 28 people indicted. Young Thug accused of being the founder, the shot caller, the person who, in their words, preserved, protected, and enhanced the reputation and power of YSL through acts of violence, intimidation, and alleged murder. But it wasn't just shootings and street intel. The feds played the long game. They had wiretaps, jail calls where members allegedly talked reckless. They had social media posts, lyrics used to describe hits, guns, and coded threats. They had DMs, texts, court documents, and even rental car records. One incident involved a car rented in Young Thug's name allegedly used in a murder. That detail, it became a centerpiece in the case. Fani Willis's strategy was clear: show a pattern. Tie every act, robbery, car theft, attempted murder, back to the larger umbrella. She used informants. She cited lyrics. She named the streets where bodies dropped. The goal wasn't just conviction. It was control. Shut down an organization from the top down. The music? It became a weapon for both sides. Prosecutors quoted Young Thug's lyrics like confessions. I'm not just anybody. I got something to do with that body. Bars that once lit up clubs were now being used in a courtroom to suggest real-life murders. Defense teams pushed back hard, arguing it was freedom of expression, protected speech. But in Georgia, lyrics can be admissible if prosecutors believe they directly relate to criminal acts. Some experts called it a reach. Others said it's the new norm. Because when the DA starts interpreting your art as evidence, everything you ever said becomes fair game. Behind the scenes, the feds were also pressuring suspects. According to reports, several YSL affiliates faced harsh charges, and some started flipping. Proffer sessions, sealed deals, cooperation in exchange for lighter time. The street code said silence. The courtroom demanded testimony. By May 2022, the indictment was ready. On paper, it was a breakdown of 8 years of alleged crime. In the streets, it was a bombshell. Young Thug, the face of Atlanta's new rap wave, was now also the face of Georgia's biggest RICO indictment in a decade. And in that moment, the line between industry and indictment disappeared. The paperwork had names, bodies, lyrics, dates, all lined up to tell one story, that YSL was more than music, whether or not that story holds up in court. That's what the next chapter's about. The morning of May 9th, 2022, Atlanta woke up to a different kind of news cycle. Helicopters overhead, sirens cutting through the south side, the kind of noise that don't mean nothing good. It wasn't a music drop, it was a manhunt. The RICO had landed and YSL was the target. Young Thug was arrested at his Buckhead home, a gated mansion far from Cleveland Ave, but still close to everything he came from. Cops swarmed in, executing search warrants with full force. Reports say they found guns, drugs, and phones. All of it added to the mounting evidence. Across the city, other YSL affiliates were rounded up, some caught off guard, others already locked up on unrelated charges. Gunna turned himself in days later. He was hit with a conspiracy count, despite no violent act attached. The message was clear. If your name was tied to the enterprise, you were part of the case. The courtroom became the stage. Cameras captured it all. Thug in his orange jumpsuit, lawyers arguing for bond, prosecutors painting a picture of ongoing threats. They said he was the most dangerous member of the crew. They argued that releasing him could lead to witness intimidation or further violence. Thug's team fought back. They argued he was a musician, not a mob boss. That lyrics aren't facts. That being around certain people doesn't make you guilty of their choices. But the judge sided with the prosecution. No bond. That's when the headlines went into overdrive. Every move, every motion became content. Legal analysts broke down the charges like rap bars. Fans flooded social media with free Thug posts. And behind the scenes, Fulton County pushed forward with more indictments, showing they weren't done using RICO. Inside the courtroom, the tension was heavy. Prosecutors read out violent lyrics as if they were blueprints. Defense attorneys pushed back hard, saying the DA was criminalizing culture, that black art was being put on trial. But the state wasn't blinking. They stood on it. Lyrics weren't the only thing they had. They had rental cars, jail calls, surveillance, alleged confessions, and most importantly, they had years of documentation. The courtroom was just the final step. For fans, it felt surreal. One of the most innovative artists of the generation, now shackled and silent, with cameras watching. For the streets, it was deeper. It wasn't just about Thug. It was about what it meant for everyone coming up. If YSL could get caught like this, who was safe? Because this wasn't a sweep. It was a strategy. And once the system moves like this, it don't just want to arrest you. It wants to rewrite your legacy. As news of the YSL takedown spread, the city split down the middle. On one side, fans and supporters rallied behind Young Thug and Gunna, flooding social media with #FreeYSL, making merch and reposting courtroom clips like it was a Netflix series. To them, this wasn't justice. It was overreach. Another example of the system targeting black success once it looked too powerful, too rich, too independent. But on the other side were families. Some of them victims, some of them just fed up. Folks who lived in neighborhoods caught in the crossfire. People who had been ducking bullets long before the feds stepped in. To them, the indictment wasn't a surprise. It was overdue. Some residents spoke anonymously to reporters, saying the streets had been hot for years, that the shootings weren't fiction, that the police were late to the game. For them, the courtroom drama wasn't entertainment. It was real life catching up to people who had long been untouchable. The media ran wild. Cable news, blogs, and YouTubers all jumped on the case. Some painted Thug as a misunderstood artist caught in a conspiracy. Others focused on the gang ties, highlighting lyrics out of context to fit their narratives. The lines between journalism and spectacle blurred fast. Fani Willis gave interviews defending her use of lyrics in court. "If you decide to admit your crimes over a beat, I'm going to use it," she said. And just like that, the debate over freedom of speech versus self-incrimination exploded across platforms. Rappers like Meek Mill, Metro Boomin, and Killer Mike spoke out. Some defended Thug. Others warned young artists to be more careful. The message was mixed. Protect art, but don't get sloppy. The industry started watching what they posted, cleaning up lyrics, deleting tweets, moving quiet. For Atlanta, this case felt personal. It was about more than one crew. It was about how the justice system sees rap culture and how fast it turns fame into evidence. Some said it was a witch hunt. Others said it was accountability. Either way, the city was listening, and the courtroom became a mirror, reflecting everything the culture loves, hates, and fears about itself. After the sweep came the unraveling. Bonds denied, trials delayed, rumors flying every which way. But what hit hardest wasn't the courtroom drama. It was the cracks forming inside YSL. December 2022. Gunna takes a plea deal. The Alford plea. He doesn't admit guilt, but he acknowledges the state had enough to convict him. When he walked out that jail in Fulton County, the internet exploded. Some said he played it smart. Others labeled it something else. In the streets, that snitch title don't come off easy. Gunna released a statement claiming he didn't cooperate, that he didn't testify. But paperwork started circulating. A video leaked. Gunna agreeing in court that YSL is a gang. That moment turned everything sideways. Loyalty was questioned. Alliances shifted. And from that point on, the silence inside YSL started getting louder. Other members began taking pleas too. Lil Duke, Slime Life Shawty. Some did short time, others walked free. The DA's office framed it as strategic. Get the lower-level guys out the way and isolate the leaders. Build pressure. Flip the ones who could hurt the case from the inside. Meanwhile, young Thug stayed locked up, refused every plea, held his position. But with every co-defendant who flipped, the walls felt closer. The court filings kept coming. Motions, appeals, evidence dumps. Defense attorneys tried to get lyrics thrown out, tried to get the RICO charge separated from individual acts, but the DA kept swinging. Thug's legal team argued he was being punished for his art. They said the case wasn't about crime, it was about culture. But behind closed doors, the court system wasn't budging. This wasn't just a rap case anymore. It was political, symbolic. Fani Willis had made it her mission. Then came the delays. Trial dates pushed back, jury selection dragging, witness lists growing longer. It was no longer just about whether Thug was guilty. It became about who would stand with him and who would testify against him. For the music, it was a freeze. Projects shelved, features pulled. Rappers who once screamed slat in their verses fell quiet. Radio stopped spinning some records, labels started backing off. That YSL stamp had turned from a badge of honor into a legal liability. And in the streets, the message hit hard. The idea that fame could shield you, gone. The dream of getting out through rap, complicated. Every young artist had to look at their crew different. Had to ask who was really riding and who was just along for the chain and clout. This case wasn't just about crime. It was about identity. And when the paperwork dropped, it rewrote more than just a headline. It rewrote futures. When you strip away the headlines, the courtroom clips, and the viral tweets, what you're left with is a hard truth. This case was never just about music. It was about proximity. Who you stand next to, who you came up with, who you never cut off. Young Thug didn't grow up in the industry. He came from Cleveland Ave, a place where the line between family and affiliation is thin. When he made it, he brought people with him. That's loyalty. That's culture. But in the eyes of the law, that's a conspiracy. The YSL indictment shines a light on something deeper than one crew. It's a mirror held up to the entire rap game. For years, artists have spit bars about pain, power, and the block. Labels profited off the authenticity. Fans ate it up. But when the lyrics started lining up with real-world violence, the state saw it as confession, not expression. The moral gets murky. Can you rap about a life you escaped if people around you still live it? Can you build an empire if your foundation's made of code and loyalty, not contracts and lawyers? And how long before that loyalty turns into silence that costs everything? What makes it complicated is the truth that in hoods like Zone 3, the rules ain't written in law books. They're written in survival. If the same dudes who protected you when you had nothing are asking for support now that you got millions, how do you say no? But the courtroom don't care about nuance. It moves off structure, paperwork, and timing. And once RICO's on the table, it doesn't need to prove you pulled the trigger. It just needs to show you kept the machine running. So the moral isn't just watch what you say in your raps. It's watch who you build with. Because in a world where clout can be monitored and bars can be subpoenaed, the price of authenticity can be your freedom. YSL might have started as brotherhood, might have been about putting the city on. But somewhere along the way, the line between art and activity disappeared. And now the courts are treating them both the same. Every RICO is a caution sign. Every indictment is a reminder. Success without separation comes with a cost. And in the world these artists come from, the difference between making it and losing it all is one decision away. If you made it this far, you already know. This wasn't just about Young Thug or YSL. This was about power, perception, and the razor-thin line between culture and crime. And once the system decided this wasn't a label but a gang, everything changed. The story ain't over. Trials are still in motion. Lives are still on pause. And the city's still watching. Whether you think the DA overreached or the streets needed cleaning up, one thing's for sure. This case shifted the conversation. The rap game just got a wake-up call. Labels, artists, and crews now move different. No more bragging on phones. No more casual name drops in lyrics. Everyone's watching what they say, and more importantly, who they say it around. Because as this RICO taught everybody, sometimes the feds don't come when you act reckless. They come when you get comfortable. This is Street Politics Report, where we break down the stories they try to bury. Not to glorify, not to gossip, but to document the truth as it happens. Because understanding the system is the first step to surviving it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Free speech or street justice? What side are you on? And who's next? Stay tapped in. Stay sharp.